What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Pack a Day podcast happy hour on this wonderful Friday of Packers opening weekend at Lambeau Field. There's mentioned this on the podcast for tomorrow, but there's always just a little bit of a different feel, different buzz. It's tangible, it's real, and it's really exciting anytime it's opening weekend in Green Bay. So hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone brought their favorite beverage, whether that be water, soda, beer, whiskey, whatever it may be. Hope you're having an amazing Friday. We'll try to get to as many questions as I can throughout the course of this episode. Somebody got mad at me last week that the happy hour didn't last a full hour. Spoiler, probably not going to be able to go a full hour today, probably 4:40, 4:45, somewhere in there, but we'll try to go as long as I can. Any super chats I will get to first, and they will have priority. We'll try to answer any member questions as well, but I'll get to as much as I possibly can, and we'll just have a good old time talking some Packers on this Friday. Most hated Minnesotan, thanks for being a Hall of Fame member, my friend. And yeah, go Pack. Absolutely. I am right there with you. Let's get to this question because I think this is a good one from Cheesehead Matt. Thanks so much for the question, Matt. Hey, Andy, what should be real expectations for Watson this year once he returns and is healthy? I think a great expectation for Christian Watson this year is what he did last year. And I know some people will point to, well, he had Aaron Rodgers last year. Aaron Rodgers was like good last year, but he wasn't like otherworldly Aaron Rodgers last year. Yeah, having Rodgers helps, but we also know Rodgers can be a bit particular sometimes with rookie wide receivers and throwing their way. So I think it took a little bit of a little bit more time for maybe Watson and Rodgers to kind of get on the same page, but we saw the explosive playmaking ability that Christian has, and I expect him to pick up right where he left off. Now, I'm not expecting 3 touchdown games every week or things like that, but I expect him to be a consistent playmaker within this offense. We see Matt LaFleur and what he's able to do and to scheme people open and get them in advantageous positions. We've seen it with Jaden Reed. We've seen a little bit with Luke Musgrave, although I'd like to see more. We've seen it with Dontavian Wicks, and we've seen him just being able to get Jordan Love some really fun and easy looks for his young quarterback. Aaron Jones, another part of that in week 1. I expect Christian Watson to be a huge part of that and have a specific plan from Matt LaFleur to get the ball in his hands because he is such a playmaker. So I'm very much expecting him to pick up right where he left off. So that's kind of my goal and expectation for Christian moving forward. All right. I saw a super chat come in, so I'll get to that in just a second, but I did see this question, which I wanted to answer as well. If run blocking fundamentals are the issue, hasn't that ship sailed? We're in season now. Ron, I wish that were the case, but we are in the modern day NFL. Look across the league. Fundamentals are poor almost all over the place. Pass blocking and run blocking fundamentals and tackling fundamentals are even worse. Like the best teams are the ones that are playing a little bit more physical, sound, fundamental football. Your Philadelphia Eagles more often than not, your San Francisco 49ers, those guys have it down. And unfortunately, what is you only get so much practice time. And really quick. All right, hopefully that helps. But yeah, I think with the fundamentals, it's just sort of a, indicative of where the league is at right now. So yeah, I think that it needs to get better. I do think it is in season and you want to see it be a little bit better, but it's a league-wide issue that with teams not playing their star players in preseason is a part of it, not having enough practice time is a part of it. And it's a constant battle. And Mike Wall talks about this all the time. If you haven't checked out the Friday episodes with Mike Wall, you are missing out because he is phenomenal to talk to every single week. But Mike talks about it all the time. Like there's only so much to some extent that you can really get across to your players. And some coaches are going to be more on the fundamentals and the tackling and the blocking. And we're going to run a handful of things, but we're going to run it extremely well. And others are going to be more on the scheme side of things. We're not maybe going to spend as much time on the blocking and the things. You have to learn that on your own. We're going to spend time on how we're going to beat the team in front of us from a scheme standpoint this upcoming week. And there's always a balance there. And the best of the best coaches and the best of the best teams are figuring out the best way to balance that. But it's a lot harder than you'd think. And like I said, it is a league-wide issue at this point. David, thanks so much for the chat. How much do you see Atlanta as an outlier matchup? A little bit. They do have some things that they have at their disposal that are really tough to sort of game plan against when they're an unfamiliar opponent early in the year, and they just do some things really well. I think, first of all, Bijan Robinson, that guy is a certified problem. He is a massive problem, and he's going to give teams fits all year long. But what they have is they have a pretty darn good offensive line. They got beat up a little bit against Carolina, and I do think there's some ways that you can attack that line, but offensive line play, we just talked about it, is kind of bad throughout the league, and theirs is solid. And if you have solid, you're in a pretty good spot overall. But when you combine a solid offensive line with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, who are two really good running backs, and obviously Robinson a playmaking back, you've got big physical box out wide receivers that have a huge catch radius for Desmond Ridder, who's not the most accurate thrower, but he can get it there and get it in the vicinity. And Drake London and Mac Hollins can do a lot of work with that. You've got Kyle Pitts, who's a unicorn at tight end. Jonnu Smith is a really perfect, ideal, traditional tight end, especially in an offense like that. Can do the dirty work, can do the blocking, but he's also a pretty darn good pass catcher as well. And then you have Desmond Ridder. And we talked about not the most accurate guy in the world, but what are they asking him to do? They're asking him to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers. In this case, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, etc. And then he also has running ability, which we saw this past week. So you have to game plan for so much against that team, from a unicorn at tight end, a amazing running back, big physical, big bodied wide receivers. They can block, they can pass, they can catch, they can do a variety of different things. And then you've got a mobile quarterback as well. There's a lot to game plan there for. Now, Green Bay's defense needed to be better in that game, no question about it, but they are definitely a talented team that, if you're not familiar with them, they're going to give you some problems. And we saw that this past week, and we'll see what they do against Detroit this week. All right. Penn, if we're indeed down Bach, then what's the avenue to victory? Realistically, would be a massive mismatch in the trenches against the stout defensive front. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. We'll see if Bakhtiari plays or not. I do think Rashid's going to play better than he did week one, or his first time as a starter in week 2 against Atlanta. I think he's a good football player. I really do. Is he David Bakhtiari? No. Is it a bummer that you're not going to have him against a Saints defensive front that boasts, Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson and those guys? Yeah, that sucks. But I do think he's going to handle himself much better in week 2. I hope they don't do quite as much rotating. And I know Adam Stenavich gave the explanation of hey, if he reports as eligible, then he either needs to stay eligible or come out the next play. That's fine. Just don't have him be the eligible guy. Let Yash do that. You don't need to you don't need to make Rashid the eligible guy. Just let him be at left tackle and not have to think about too many things. So I think he'll settle down a little bit more. Green Bay will have home field advantage and home crowd advantage for the first time all season, which will help and put a little less pressure on those offensive tackles. And I still think, even without Bakhtiari, even without Elton, that this is a offensive line that can pass protect. I think the big question is going to be, what can they do from a run blocking standpoint? And they're going to miss Bakhtiari and Jenkins quite a bit from that standpoint. And we'll see if Aaron Jones plays. We know he can make a little bit more happen with less blocking up front. They're going to need him this week, but Matt LaFleur is just going to have a really great game plan. I think you have a really young but talented offense against a really experienced and talented defense, and that matchup is going to go a long way this week. But you would obviously clearly love to have Bakhtiari out there if at all possible. Yes, ROK Beast Alexander is on the injury report for his back. He is, and he did practice, so that's a good sign. And also remember, there's no probable anymore. So if there's anything that is a slight flare up, and even if you would be probable for the game, you still have to list them as questionable. I'm not really sure why the NFL did it. It seemed like they wanted to have more transparency on their injury report, but allowed for more vagueness by not having players be probable or questionable. That always seemed a little bit weird to me, but we'll see if he ultimately can play. We just don't know at this point. Like I said, he did practice before we knew there was any injury. Just kind of watching him warm up, you would have never guessed that there was any sort of injury. So hopefully he's able to go, but talked about this a little bit for tomorrow's pod that I recorded already. It's not just that there's injuries and there's now the list is getting taller. It's the caliber of players that are hurt that makes it so freaking frustrating, because it's Jair Alexander, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, Elton Jenkins, David Bakhtiari. It is the best of your best players that are down injured at the moment. And it makes it really hard to win in this league when you have injuries, period. But when it's to the best of your best players, you are just constantly behind the 8 ball. So the good news is the 2 players who are out are Zane Anderson and Elton Jenkins. We knew about Jenkins. Zane Anderson has been inactive every week so far anyway, so that's going to be fine from that standpoint. Jenkins, again, they knew about, still sucks, but at least they knew about it. The only questionable player who did not practice on Friday was David Bakhtiari, and he went to practice even if he was good to go. So that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to play. So the questionable players hopefully can go, but it's going to definitely be a game time decision, I think, for a lot of those guys. All right, Joey, I am in lockstep with you. Let Musgrave eat. Maddie needs to call some plays for him. The one thing I will say is this past week is one of those that you have to kind of throw out a little bit from a like, who are they scheming up and who are they trying to get the ball to standpoint. You had 40 some plays. Like, you're missing 20 plus plays in that game. Like, a normal is like 65 to 70, and you had 40 something. So you're probably down about 20 plays. So if you get those 20 more plays in that game, like, Musgrave probably gets 3 more targets. Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, maybe Dylan gets 3 or 4 more, but like, whatever the case may be, you're going to have the opportunity to spread the ball a little bit more, and everyone seems a little bit more featured. But when you don't have those 20 plays, everyone feels like they didn't get the ball enough. So I think you have to throw it a little bit of that second week, but I'm with you that I do think they need to feature Luke Musgrave a little bit more moving forward. Salty Jordy, thanks so much for the membership. I am doing great. Do we know exactly what Stokes' injury was in Detroit? All I remember is it being non-contract, ankle and knee. I know he had like a foot thing, an ankle thing, a knee thing. It was like everything. It was really bad. I think I don't want to speak on it 1,000,000% for sure. I want to say, what's the freaking injury? Yeah, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I don't know exactly what it was, but I do know it was a extremely significant injury where right before the season, he hadn't even been doing any running yet and just kind of got cleared to do a little bit more right before like training camp had started and stuff. So I don't know if he's going to be back right away once the pup list is done, or if he's still going to have some time. He continues to work with trainers, to the side. Just don't know. I don't know when Tenuta might be back either. Those are, unfortunately, the coaches and the team don't want to address too much of when a player might be back, because then you set expectations. And then if they're not back, it looks like they're doing worse. So I get it, but we won't have a great feel until he's eligible to come off the pup list. And then we'll see if he actually does or not. LOL. I will answer this in the most LOL possible way. Whatever I say from a fantasy standpoint, do the opposite. Just do me a favor and do the opposite. So this week I would go Dobbs, because I think Watson, even if he plays, will be on a pitch count. So take my advice for whatever you will. If you want to trust me, go with Dobbs. If you want my true fantasy advice, do the opposite of what I would normally say, because usually I get that stuff wrong. So probably go with Christian Watson. So take that for what it's worth. Yes, Liz Frank was the word I was looking for. Thank you so much, Adam Stanky. I couldn't remember what I kept wanting to say Achilles, and I knew it wasn't Achilles. But yes, Liz Frank was the key injury, which can be extremely debilitating for a athlete the caliber of Eric Stokes. And that's the big thing I keep talking about as well. If Eric Stokes comes back, and he's not 4.340 Eric Stokes, that's a lot different, because he won with his speed. Remember, there'd be a lot of times he did not win with technique. He did not win with physicality. He's not the most physically intimidating tackler in the world. He won with raw, unadulterated speed. Now, he's got good size overall, and you match that with good speed, and he looks the part. But there have been multiple plays over the course of his first couple of years in the league where he's beat clean off the line, and the only reason that he's able to get back in the play is because of his ridiculous speed. So if he's a 4.540 guy instead of a 4.3, that's a lot different version of Eric Stokes. So it's not just that he's back. Is he back, and is he the same athlete that he was prior to that Liz Frank injury? So that's going to be one that absolutely is worth keeping an eye on as well. Joey Stokes looked ready at the end of camp, even sounded annoyed about not being allowed to practice with the team when asked by fans. This is going to be, I don't know. Those are so, like, when Bakhtiari came back at different times when he was recovering, like, he'd be working to the side and would look like really good. And you'd be like, oh, maybe that guy's ready to come back. And then it was like another year before he came back. So those are always really tough things to tell. And I'm sure he's annoyed overall. I'm sure he'd love to practice, but we know Green Bay is going to be pretty cautious with those things also. David, is Monson going to be on the pod weekly? Love those chats, by the way. Yes. All of our guests, as of right now, are set to be weekly chats. So Mike Wall, Carmen Vitale, Justice Mosqueda, Paul Brettel, Sam Monson, those are all set to go weekly. I've got to figure out this week with the Thursday night game. We may have a little bit different lineup this week, because just it's a short week, and it might be tough to get everyone in prior to everything, with also having to preview the game and review the previous game. It's just going to be a really short week. So this week might be a little bit different, and I might not have as many guests this week just because of that. So we'll see. Don't know quite yet, but I'll keep you posted. But yes, all of them will be weekly guests all throughout the season. And by the way, I know some people have asked to, or just have commented of like, we still want to see just that Andy shows, which first of all, why? I'm just kidding. It's great to have the guests on, but for those of you who just want me, you're still going to get 4-ish at least episodes every week. Usually the Monday every other is going to be just me breaking down the game from the night before. Perry and Alex will be on every other week. And then you're usually going to get the film grade episode from me. You're usually going to get the scouting report for the upcoming game from me. Sometimes I might have a guest from like from an expert from the other team on, but otherwise that'll be just me. The pregame show is always going to be just me. The live, Q&As, like the happy hour is always going to be me. The post-game show, if for the road games, is always just going to be me. So there's always going to be, either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side of the fence you fall on, still a decent amount of me. Plus, if you're interested in becoming a Pack-A-Day podcast member, I'm also putting out an extra, at least one episode every week, and you get a members-only Q&A every week with me as well. So there's a lot of opportunity. Also, if you check out the Pack-A-Day podcast audio channel, we have an extra episode every single day from our awesome podcast team there. So we're doing 2-a-days on the audio channel. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely make sure to check that out as well. Jay Western, great question. First of all, I did not see Lou Holtz's interview today. And no, I am not a Notre Dame fan. These are Live Lucky hats, Black Clover. The best part, see, I'm going to think like everyone's going to think that I'm like doing advertisements here. I'm not, but I just got a whole new shipment of Black Clover hats because I got to keep it going. I'm actually sort of mad that they don't just sponsor me or at least send me free hats, but they probably know by now that I'm just going to keep buying them anyway. But whole new one. They are Live Lucky brand Black Clover hats, nothing to do with Notre Dame. So don't mind Notre Dame. I know some people either hate them or love them. I don't mind them. I like the tradition of it all, but can't say I'm a Notre Dame fan. All right, Franklin, how has Lucas Van Ness been looking? It depends on what your question is. If it's from a health standpoint, I think he's going to be good to go and ready to play this week. Does have a little bit of a brace on his arm, although it looked smaller today. I thought it looked like it was maybe just a much smaller version of it, just in the little bit that I saw him. But I think he's going to play. I would be pretty surprised if he didn't. As far as his play on the field, extremely excited about the way he's playing. He has no idea what he's doing yet, and he's still super impactful, which is exactly kind of what you, I mean, what you really want to see is he knows what he's doing and he's super impactful, but give him time. He is going to put it together even more, and he's already really good and just a force on the edge with knowing a fraction of what he's going to know in a year or two. So super, super excited about his upside as an edge player. I know, David. I know. It's frustrating. I emailed him too. I'd be like, hey, I've been wearing your logo on my channel like every day for like 3 years now. Maybe like a couple free hats or something, but no, ridiculous. All right. Thoughts on the run D actually being decent. Yes, Fields and Bijan had like 6.5 yards per carry, but they're both special in space. Herbert, Foreman, Johnson, Algier, Ritter all held around 4 yards per carry. I'm glad you brought this up to some extent. First of all, I'm not willing to say that they're decent yet. I need to see a lot more from Green Bay's run defense before I'm willing to go in that direction. I do think another thing that played a huge part in this last game is they just wore down as the game went along. It's week 2. You don't really play in preseason. You're certainly not playing 60, 70, 80 snaps in preseason. You maybe get a handful here and there. And the offense just couldn't keep the defense off the field either. So I think part of that was wearing down. But the bigger part that I'm glad you brought up is sometimes, and it's frustrating to say, but like we have all of these high expectations for how our, Green Bay's star players play every week of like, oh, like they need to be the star. They need to go out and play really well. And the expectation is that every week your best players are going to go out and play at a certain level. It works for the other team too. Justin Fields and, from a running standpoint, at least, and probably the only standpoint, and, Bijan Robinson, those are star players in that aspect. Now, they didn't run Fields all that much, and they should have, and we don't need to get into all of the Chicago stuff and everything that they're doing wrong. But I will say those are talented freaking football players. The stuff that Justin Fields did when Jair came off the edge and then juked and got around the corner, and like that stuff is just special. And at some point you do need to tip your cap to like Bijan Robinson. Like there are multiple times where like 3 guys are there and he's just and like makes everyone miss because he's He's like freaking Nightcrawler from X-Men and just teleport in different spots. So yeah, give those guys credit too. They get paid. They're really freaking good. And just as we expect Packers star players to ball out every single week, those guys are going to more often than not ball out every single week as well. All right. Tristan, thanks so much. It's ironic that the first time we needed running back, Tyler Goodson isn't on the team. I was so excited about seeing him. The whole thing with Tyler is just frustrating the way it went, and not anything that anyone did wrong, because I'm with you. I do think what Green Bay needed for the majority of the time with Jones and Dillon was not a third running back. They needed, Patrick Taylor. They needed somebody who can come in and pass protect, play special teams, catch the ball out of the backfield. They needed that, sort of do it all guy, which is exactly not what Tyler Goodson is. Tyler Goodson's like, if you've got Derrick Henry as your one, Tyler Goodson's like a perfect number two. And, he can come in and be the change of pace, be a really fun running back, maybe do a little bit of kick returning. And you don't really want him in on third downs. You don't really want him being your primary back, but like a perfect change of pace, he could do that. And it's just not what Green Bay needed, because you don't need a change of pace to your change of pace guy, which is Aaron Jones. And they needed, again, that third guy. Now, we can have the Dillon debate and whatever. Overall, over the course of the past 3 years, the Dillon Jones dynamic has worked fairly well, and they just didn't need Tyler. So to your point, now they actually could use another running back, and now Tyler Goodson's not on the roster and not even eligible to be on the roster because he had an injury settlement, which means whatever that injury settlement is for, if it's 2 weeks, then he can't play for Green Bay for 2 weeks plus 3 weeks beyond that. So he is on a practice squad right now. I'm forgetting off the top of my head which practice squad it is with. Is Indianapolis, maybe? I can't remember. But either way, it is a bummer that didn't work out. I think we all saw that there was talent there. It just, the timing never worked out. And sometimes that just is the way that it is for an undrafted player, whether it's in their first year, second year, whatever it may be. Any sort of injury in training camp is just a complete kiss of death, because you have to go above and beyond to prove yourself as a player. And if you have anything like that happen, it just puts you so behind the eight ball. So yeah, it absolutely, absolutely sucks. And yeah, it would be fun to have him on the roster right now. My guess, pure unadulterated guess, is that they still would have went with Dillon, Emmanuel Wilson, and Patrick Taylor last week, but I guess that's neither here nor there. All right. Dwayne, thanks so much. We seem to frequently have problems with smash mouth teams like San Francisco, Atlanta, Saints, etc. At the risk of using this term with an NFL team, are we too much of a finesse team? I talked about this a little bit. I forget when. It might have been the members only chat too, but I mentioned before the Atlanta game that game was a eat your vegetables type of game. It was going to come down to fundamentals. It was going to come down to blocking and tackling. And to be honest, and I'm right there with you, Dwayne, Green Bay has not done super well in those games over the course of certainly the Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst era, but I think even going back a little bit towards the end of the McCarthy and Thompson eras, the Colts sort of really went all in this way of like, we're going to put up 30 plus points a game with Peyton Manning. So we're just going to build a defense that is fast and can get to the quarterback and play pass defense, because we'll make it a track meet and then you won't be able to keep up with us. That was sort of their thinking, but a lot of times they would get into playoff games with New England, who was a little bit more of a smash mouth team and being able to play a little bit more physical, and they would struggle in those situations. Overall, I would say over the course of Aaron Rodgers' career, they built it in a similar way. Aaron in this offense is going to be able to put up points. Let's put pass defenders on this team and guys who can get after the quarterback and those sort of things. And I don't think they really emphasize the trenches and maybe some of the physicality as much as maybe they should have. And I think over the years, the games against San Francisco are a great example of that in the playoffs. When they get into those drag them out, beat down brawl of games, a lot of times they don't do very well. So there's something to it. What I mentioned the other day too is it's very, very difficult to find players that are good at everything. Meaning if you're on defense that are both good in pass defense and in run defense, those players are usually your blue chip players, your highest paid players, because they can stay on the field for everything. They can pass defend, they can run defend, and they're just stars. That is what they are. But a lot of times you have to figure out, because you can't just have a whole team of amazing players, you have to figure out kind of what you're going to emphasize. Green Bay over the last 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer, has emphasized more passing on offense and pass defense. And it's always an interesting concept because you play in Lambeau in December and January, where you would think more physical smash mouth football would be the team that you want to sort of build around. But they've kind of gone the other direction. Now, if you can't pass and you can't pass defend in this league, you're screwed too. If you can't run defend, you're usually pretty screwed too. It's just, there's no perfect, beautiful solution to anything because, yeah, everyone would love to have great players on both sides of the ball that can do everything, but that's not the reality of it. And usually you have to sort of emphasize something. So I do think that from time to time, this team needs a little bit more toughness, physicality, intensity. Hopefully that's something that can continue to develop. But right now they have, I agree with you. They have struggled in those sort of games more often than not. All right. David, do you think early, I know you see any position groups Green Bay targets in free agency? I think Justice said D-line was likely. Do you mean now or in the offseason? I'm going to assume that you're meaning in the offseason. If you're meaning in the offseason, there's three positions that I think Green Bay is going to try to upgrade next year, either via the draft or free agency. Safety, clearly and obviously. Anthony Johnson Jr. and Zane Anderson are the only ones under contract next year. So that's going to need something. Now, they could bring back their own guys, but I think they're going to want to find upgrades there. So safety's one. I think offensive line is another. It's another spot where they could just keep their own guys. Theoretically, they could go into next year with Bakhtiari and Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, and Zach Tom again. That's within the realm of possibility. But I think there's also a possibility that David is playing his last year in Green Bay. John Runyon Jr. is a free agent. Yosh Nijman's a free agent. Josh Myers is a bit of an unknown. So, and Elton Jenkins has had injury issues as of late. So I do think they're going to probably start to build up that offensive line and start building that depth again. And then the other one is running back. Aaron Jones potentially could be playing his last year in Green Bay, or if not, is still winding down in the next couple of years. A.J. Dillon, free agent, and then you're not basing any decisions in the offseason based on Emmanuel Wilson or any other running back you have in the roster. So I would say running back, offensive line, and safety are the three this offseason that are probably the big targets. All right. Well, Joseph, thanks for the question. Will the short, quick passing game be an emphasis in this game due to the stingy defense with occasional deep shots to keep them honest? That's a good question. I do think that's going to be a piece of it. I don't think that, especially if Bakhtiari's out, I don't think they're going to want to do too much deep stuff, but Matt LaFleur is going to see, exactly what their defense is going to do, and then he's going to adjust accordingly. I think Marcus May being out, Paulson Adebo's on the injury report on Friday, which is new. He had not been there, and he did not practice on Friday with a hamstring injury. If Adebo is out, and we already know Marcus May is out with the suspension, Matt might try to test them deep a little bit. Now, offensive line's going to have to hold up. They can do some max protect stuff as well to hopefully, help with that, but they're still going to get their deep shots in, no question about it. But I think they're going to still spread the ball around. I think they'll try to get the ball out of Love's hands, and I'm sure they're going to desperately try to run the ball. I just don't know how well it's going to go. Oh, Joey, I don't know, man. I've gone back and forth on this all week. I think I joked with Paul Brettel because I think with Justice, I said I would go with Sean Ryan. And then I think with Paul, I said I'd go with Royce Newman. If Bakhtiari's, and Matt already said this, but I said this earlier this week, if Bakhtiari can't go, you go Rasheed Walker at left tackle. That's easy. I don't mess with my right side of the line. I go Myers at center, Runyon at right guard, and Zach Tom at right tackle. And I'm no matter what's going on at left side, I know they want to get the best five guys out there. I'm not messing with my right side of the offensive line. By the way, quietly over the last half of last year, and even in his limited snaps this year and in preseason, let's just say there's a reason that Yosh Nijman got demoted from not only starter, not only swing tackle, but to the number 4 tackle on this team. He's not been very good. So it's not like especially if Bakhtiari's out, it's not like I'm dying to get Yosh on the field at right tackle so I can put Zach Tom at left guard. I feel like I'm just making right tackle a whole heck of a lot worse. And I feel like who's ever going to be playing at left guard is actually not that much different than what Yosh Nijman will put on tape at right tackle. So I'm going Zach Tom at right tackle, Running right guard, Myers center, either Rasheed Walker or David Bakhtiari left tackle, and then left guard. I'm going to try to keep down my lunch here. I'm probably going Royce Newman at left guard, but I'm going to have a really short leash. And if he struggles at all, we're going to try out Sean Ryan and see what he's capable of. So that's where I'm leaning right now. The only other thing I would consider, I've said this in the past, and I thought I was maybe just stupid, but Mike Wall actually said it this week as well. I do wonder if Bakhtiari can play, if they would consider Rasheed Walker at left guard. I don't think that is that absurd of a thing to consider. And a part of me does wonder if Bakhtiari, Walker, Myers, Runyon, and then, Zach Tom might be their best five if with Jenkins out. So I don't think that's the direction they're going to go. I do think there's an opportunity or a possibility they could go with Zach Tom at left guard and Yash at right tackle. But if it's me, and since you're asking me, I'll go either Walker or Bakhtiari at left tackle. I'm going to start with Royce at left guard, but have a short leash, and then go Myers and then Runyon and Zach Tom. I know. I would just leave this up there while I say it. I agree with you, All Out News. Josh Jacobs, thanks for taking some time off of your busy NFL schedule to come and chat with us. Which rookie on offense has impressed you the most through 2 weeks? Wicks was awesome last week. Over the last 2 weeks, it's either Wicks or Reed. I'll go Reed just because I think there's a little bit more juice there, and I think he's going to get some of the playmaking stuff. But Wicks has been really exciting as well, and he's right on Reed's tail. And I just don't think we've seen enough Musgrave yet to to beat out those two. I guess I'll put it that way. So Reed 1, Wicks 2, a very close second, and then probably Musgrave after that. And then, it's not like Emmanuel Wilson's done anything. Nobody on the offensive line. Ben Sims has been fine. Tucker Kraft hasn't really played all that much, but I'd probably go in that order. Mr. Mikey Riggs, how do we stop Taysom Hill? So I talked about that. I'm hesitant to go over this too much because I spent a decent chunk of time talking on this on tomorrow's episodes, on the scouting report episode. So check that out. But I know that he got way overpaid, and that made the kind of cuteness of the whole situation kind of go away just because he got way overpaid. I also know that when they had Drew Brees and they took Drew Brees off the field to give the ball to Taysom Hill, it probably wasn't the smartest move in the world. In fact, it cost them a game against Green Bay when Taysom Hill fumbled based on a forced fumble by Zadarius Smith. So I do get those things, but the way that they're using Taysom Hill right now is really, really fun. Check out tomorrow's scouting report episode. I go into it in much more detail, but there's a lot of really cool things that they're doing with him. And it does make it a pain in the ass to try to go against the Saints, because as Joe Barry mentioned this week, it's basically like you're game planning for two completely different offenses based on who's in at quarterback. So, and there's no tell ahead of time. Just because Taysom Hill's in the game doesn't mean he's going to be at quarterback. They use him everywhere. So it is a really cool feature that they have, and it is something that is a pain to have to game plan against. All right. Yeah, Jamal is out this week. I think there was a little bit of chat about him, and bummer not to see him. You would love to see Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams going head to head this week, but unfortunately, we're not sure if we're going to need either of them. We know Jamal's going to be out, and Aaron is questionable. Franklin, I don't know. Maybe they showed some level of interest. So if and when he does become a free agent this offseason, they could have interest in him. I think they're going to want to upgrade that position. I think the NFL is in a constant swing. And just when you think running backs are out of popularity and don't really matter and don't spend money on them and don't spend premium draft picks on them, all of a sudden, what happens? Teams are playing too high safeties and they're not allowing explosive plays through the air. So what do you need to do? You need to generate explosive plays through the ground. What happens when you generate explosive plays through the ground? That safety starts coming up in the box. And what happens when that safety starts coming up in the box? You have more explosive plays available to you in the passing game. And what's the best way to generate explosive plays on the ground? If you have explosive running backs. And now all of a sudden, I think you see Bijan Robinson and what he's been able to do for Atlanta. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be that guy for Detroit. Jonathan Taylor has proven over the years he can be that explosive playmaker for the Colts. That's going to change the dynamic. If you've got it, and Christian McCaffrey's doing it right now for the 49ers, you've got that explosive playmaking ability at running back, and that changes the calculus for you right now. So I don't think it's going to swing entirely. And I think you still don't want to probably overpay too much for running backs, but I do think we're going to start seeing a swing back where running the football, power football, and just playmaking running backs are really going to be a little bit more in vogue than maybe they have been for a little bit here. Hey, Wade, thank you so much for that. Make sure to ask a question next time, but really appreciate you doing that. That's super kind of you. Josh, is it Carrington Valentine season this weekend? If Jair can't go or is limited, I would absolutely think so. I can't imagine that they would go in any other direction there. Obviously, Stokes is still out. Nixon's going to be in the slot, and there's just Yeah, they're not going to go any other way. So yeah, Carrington and Razul would start on the outside in that situation, which I would kind of be pretty excited for. So yeah. Antip, I'm not even going to try, but that's a really awesome name. Are you a Wisconsin fan? I am. I am a Badger fan. College football has I enjoy college football to watch college football prospects, and that's kind of it. I do really appreciate the changes that they made to the game this year to make it faster because they were bordering on like 4.5, 5 hour games, and it was just like, oh my god. More often than not, I just kind of love having like a Badger game or a college football game on in the background. I'm not super intent on it, but I am a Badger football fan, Badger basketball fan. I will say that since covering the Packers full time and making it a 365-day a year thing, my fandom of some of the other teams has unfortunately taken a hit. At the same time, I can't really take my analyst glasses off too much for the Packers. So a lot of times with the Brewers and the Bucks, I could just to be a fan, like a dumb idiot, open up a 6-pack of beer fan, which I can't really do for the Packers anymore. So there is an element to that I really enjoy as well. All right, what else we got here? Richard, regardless of what happens to Bakhtiari next season, do you see the Packers targeting an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds? I hesitate to say like first 2 rounds because the board has to fall to you a certain way. You're not going to take one just to take one. But as I mentioned, safety, offensive lineman, and running back, I think are going to be the 3 positions that they target pretty heavily next year in the draft, and probably earlier rather than later. And yes, even if Bakhtiari is back. Would I rather have an offensive line room consisting of 10 Royce Newmans or Amari Rodgers being our returner for the next 10 years? I'll take Amari for a returner. And I'm not even going to put anyone back at returner. I'm going punt block every single play. And we're not even going to have somebody back at returner. And I'm not going to survive with 10 Royce Newmans doing anything on offense. So I will ruin my special teams, Jay Western, from my return ability. And I'm just going to make sure I don't actually put him back. Or if he's back there, he is banned from actually touching the ball. He's a decoy only, and he just has to let the ball bounce, and we'll take the ball wherever we get it. Joseph, do you think the long snapper has bought some steak dinners for Waylon yet for corralling some high snaps? There's been a few of those. I think Warzik's going to be all right. I'm not super concerned over him, but yeah, Waylon's done a nice job overall. I know a lot of people are hesitant to crown Waylon until we see him in some tougher weather, which will come, and it always is an adventure. But I think Waylon's been the real deal so far, which has been really fun to watch. Jay Western, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's go through the injuries really quick since I know. And let me preface this by saying I have no freaking clue, but this would be my hypothesis. LVN plays. I think has a full complement of snaps. Maybe they keep him back a little bit, but I think he plays. I think Jair plays. My guess is there's probably that's a tough one to know because I only got to see him warm up and stretch, and I don't know how severe the injury is, but he did practice today. So my guess is Jair probably plays. Bakhtiari, I'm not even going to venture a guess. Your guess, my guess, the Packers' guess, Bakhtiari's guess. It's all just a guess at this point. We have no freaking clue. So do with that what you will. Flip a coin, and that is probably your best indicator on that one. Obviously, Elton and Zane Anderson aren't going to play. And then I think Christian Watson plays a limited amount of snaps. Not maybe too dissimilar to what we saw Romeo Doubs week 1, but high 20s, I'll say, in snaps for Watson this week, maybe somewhere in the 20s. But I do think we see him play in some capacity. Aaron Jones is, I think, another one that's a legitimate coin flip. I could see them holding him out until Thursday and just giving him a few extra days since that Thursday game is coming up. If he's ready to go, I could also see them playing him and just giving him 10 to 12 snaps, maybe, or like 10 to 12 touches, I should say. But that's another really tough one. So I kind of feel good about everyone outside of Bakhtiari and Jones. I just don't have a great feel for, but Alden Jones, I don't know. That's a coin flip as well. So we'll see. Most State of Minnesota and Jordan Love scores 3 touchdowns again. Thanks for all you do. I'm going to say no. I don't think he scores 3 touchdowns. I think if Green Bay gets 3 touchdowns, they'll get something on the ground on this one. But I think he's going to continue to play well. And obviously, that's the more important side of things. Probably due for an interception at some point or a turnover. It's just the way quarterbacking goes, especially when you're a young quarterback and going against a veteran defense. Don't know if he'll be able to keep a clean sheet again this week, but I think he's going to still play some pretty darn good quarterback. And I think that's what you're looking for right now. And I'm still excited to see Jordan Love play every single week right now. All right. Anything else? Probably got about maybe 5 minutes left. Anyone else got any questions? This is a good one. All right. What are your thoughts on PFF's grading of Jordan Love? They seem to be holding him to a different standard than some other graders. Well, first of all, for my grades, because I go through and grade every single player and every single play, I've done it since 2017, I think it is. I've really liked what I've seen so far from Jordan through 2 games. I have a very solid grade on him. Now, our grade week 1 wasn't all that dissimilar. So, like a six, so their 60 is a 0.0 for me. So I think they had him as maybe a low 70s in that first game, and I had him as like a plus 0.5 or something like that. So it really, I don't think it was that far off. In the second week, I know they started with a below 60 grade, so like a negative grade on him, and I had a +1 grade on him. I think he was my highest graded player on offense this week, if I remember correctly. So I really like Jordan and his play this game. What I will say about grades is that unless you go through and watch every single play with a fine tooth comb, it is a really painstaking and difficult job to do because everyone's going to have a different feel for what constitutes a positive and a negative on a given play. There are a multitude of plays where you could go back and forth and be like, well, it's a positive because of this, or it's a negative because of this. The Malik Heath play this past week is a great example of that. My guess is that they had a much harsher grade on Jordan on that Malik Heath play than maybe what I did. Is it a turnover worthy play from Jordan? It is. Is it a negative play from Jordan? It is. Did he leave the ball a bit too much inside? He did. Do I think that mistake was a little bit more on Malik than it was on Jordan? I do. I think that was a really poor route by Malik. I thought he let the corner be a bit too physical with him. I thought he let the corner get inside, and I think he let the corner get to the ball quicker than he did. I just think that's a bigger mistake on Malik Heath, and I graded Malik Heath harsher on it than I did for Jordan Love. Now, at the same token, Jordan has to know that the reward there is that that's a completion short of the sticks and they're punting the ball away anyway. The risk is a pick six that gives them the game, probably, because they were up at that point. So not a great risk reward. So not a great decision on that side of things. And then probably not a great decision to do a trust ball to your undrafted rookie wide receiver who played a handful of snaps that game against one of the best corners in football in AJ Terrell. So probably not the right matchup, probably not the right throw, probably not a lot of things on that play from Jordan. And if you wanted to grade him a super harsh negative, I understand it and I get it. Like I said, I had a little bit of a worse grade on Malik on that play because I thought at some point your quarterback's giving you an opportunity to go make a play. And I thought Malik made a really bad play on that one. And AJ Terrell made a great play. So it just is in the eye of the beholder. And ultimately, I would say through 2 weeks, it wasn't like egregiously different between PFF and I. Like I said, I had a nice grade on him this week. I think PFF had an average grade on him this week, and we weren't too far apart on week 1. But it's really tough to do, overall, if you're going through and grading every single play. And a lot of it is in the eye of the beholder. A lot of it's the grader, and all of it. It's a tough thing to do. Gary, well played. Very, very well played. All right, maybe 1 or 2 more. Yeah, Richard, this is a tough question. So he asked, what do you think Joe Barry needs to do to change Packer fans' opinions of wanting to fire him? A coordinator is always going to be the caricature of the offense or the defense or the special teams as a whole, and more often than not, at least. I guess it can be the coach too if he's calling the plays and running the offense and so on and so forth. But if the special teams is not performing as a top 15 special teams unit, fire Rich Bisaccia. If the defense is not performing as a top 15 defense, fire Joe Barry. The offense isn't performing as a top 15 offense, fire Matt LaFleur. It just is like, it's the name of the game. Now, it comes with levels to it, and it comes with a little bit more forgiveness depending on what you've done in the past and what you've done recently. For Joe Barry, this is year 3 for a season in which a lot of people had sort of expected him to be gone already, or in many cases were hoping he was going to be gone already. And Matt LaFleur brought him back for a 3rd season and had trust in him. So I think what a lot of Packer fans are on the side of is, all right, maybe we're going to give you this one more chance, but you have to prove it early and often that you were deserving of that chance. And I think a game against Atlanta where they've got some star players and it's a tough matchup. It's not great, but Packers offense is banged up, and you're hoping that the defense does the heavy lifting in that game. And not only did they not do the heavy lifting, they allow Atlanta to come back from 12 points and don't stop them and yada, yada, yada. You know the rest. So that's a game where you want to see more out of Joe Barry in the defense. You watch the tape closely. Quay Walker misses an interception. Jair misses an interception. That changes the game quite a bit. How many missed tackles did Bijan Robinson force where Joe Barry had his players in a position to make a play? Were there plays where Joe didn't have a great design, a great play call, the great scheme matchup for the opposing offense? Yes, unquestionably. Were there a lot of plays on the field where Rashawn Gary is reading and not staying home and he's going crashing down on the running back instead of staying at his spot and Rasul Douglas is getting pissed at him on the field? Yeah. Is there a play at the very next play after Rasul gets pissed at Rashawn for missing his assignment that he misses his assignment on a wheel route to Rasul Douglas? Yes. So it is a mixture. But it's also the coordinator's job that's like basically the head of the entire defense to make sure that the communication is good, the intensity is good, that all of it's good. So there's too much blame on Joe Barry through the first 2 weeks of this season. That's how I feel. It's too much that there are other things that are at play here than just Joe Barry. But knowing that the first 2 seasons under Joe were not good enough as a whole in 2 years, and that this is sort of a prove it year for Joe, and that the defense wasn't up to snuff in week 2 already again, I understand why there are complaints and calls for the angry Joe Barry stuff again. So not bashing it. I do think it's a little bit over the top based on what we've seen so far, but in a way I also sort of understand it. So I'll end with this one, Tristan, because this is fun. If Salah's fired, he's our next guy next year. Cheers to a bad season for the Jets. So first of all, it takes a bad season from Green Bay to fire Joe Barry and a bad enough season from the Jets where they fire Robert Saleh. And the big thing there, though, is if Aaron comes back, he's probably going to want Saleh and Hackett and everything to stay as is. And I think if Aaron's back, the Jets decide, hey, that year, the 2023 was not indicative of the real Saleh Jets team. And let's give it an opportunity next year with Aaron. Now, the issue becomes if they're really, really bad, which they can be really, really bad, and we're talking picks 1 through 3, and they want to go get Sanders or May or Caleb Williams or one of those guys at quarterback, that could change the calculus of the entire way that team goes. So yes, there could be a world in which, he's out and they just go in an entirely different direction. And who knows where Aaron Rodgers ends up quarterbacking next year. That's a whole different can of worms, but there's a world in which that could happen. But here's the other thing. Brandon Staley, Chargers head coach. I think there's a real chance, and I don't know anything. I have no inside information. I think there's a real chance that if they lose in Minnesota, like going away this week, and they go to 0-3, I think there's a chance he gets fired after that game. Like, I think it's that bad where that's a team that's expected to be a playoff team. They don't have Austin Eckler in that game. They're going to Minnesota. Minnesota's coming off extra rest because they had the Thursday night game, and that's setting up to be a potential Minnesota victory. If Minnesota wins that game and the Chargers go to 0-3, I think Brandon Staley could be out. And if he's out, I don't think Joe Barry is going to get fired this early in the season. I don't even think it's in the realm of conversation or anything like that, nor should it be at this point. But it wouldn't shock me if by the bye week, which is early this year, remember, Brandon Staley is in Green Bay as a consultant on the staff, helping this Packers defense because he has that connection with Matt LaFleur. And if things go bad with Joe Barry the rest of the season, you've got that guy on staff that you can make that switch to. So just something to keep an eye on over these next few weeks if the Chargers continue to struggle. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Sorry to who's ever upset that the happy hour didn't go an exact hour like last week, but I got a couple things I got to get done. We'll have an all-new episode for you guys tomorrow morning, doing a full scouting report on everything Packers Saints, so make sure to check that out. Awesome conversation with Mike Wall today. Awesome conversations yesterday with Sam Monson and Carmen Vitale, so check those out as well. You guys are the absolute best. Thank you for supporting me. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.